Queensland. For the past 4 years, it's been the darling of the Australian property market. Prices have surged in Brisbane, Gold Coast, and on the Sunshine Coast. People are moving north in their thousands. Investors have been piling in. But what happens when the music stops? What happens to Queensland in a recession? Is the lifestyle migration story strong enough to protect the market? Or is a correction hiding behind all that sunshine? Let's find out. So Queensland has one of the most interesting economic profiles of any Australian state. It is genuinely diverse with mining and resources, where Queensland has significant coal, LNG, metals production, particularly in the regions. Tourism, the Great Barrier Reef, the Whitsundays, theme parks, beaches. Tourism is a multi-billion-dollar industry. Agriculture, Queensland is a powerhouse food producer. Construction, mainly driven by population growth and the Olympic infrastructure pipeline. Healthcare and education. This is growing rapidly as the population ages and expands. Increasingly, professional services, following the migration of businesses and workers from southern states. This diversity is a genuine strength, but each of these sectors has its own recession sensitivity. So the migration story here in Queensland, this is the defining feature of Queensland's recent property boom. From roughly 2020 onwards, Queensland experienced unprecedented net interstate migration. People left Melbourne and Sydney, and they moved for lifestyle, affordability, and for space. And they brought the equity with them. That equity from southern state property sales turbocharged the Queensland prices. Buyers could afford to pay more than local incomes would typically support, and that pushed values up sharply. Now, here's the risk in a recession. If property markets in Sydney and Melbourne soften significantly, the equity that southern migrants bring to Queensland also shrinks. The buyer who sold a Sydney home for $2 million in 2021 might only get 1.7 in 2026 if a correction hits. That reduces what they can spend in Brisbane, and that removes one of the key tailwinds that drove the Queensland boom. Tourism. Queensland is more exposed to tourism than any other major Australian state. And tourism is one of the most cyclical sensitive industries there is. In a recession, people cut discretionary spending first. Domestic holidays are reduced or even cancelled. Hospitality jobs are lost. And in regions heavily dependent on tourism, like parts of the Gold Coast or Whitsundays, they feel the pain very quickly. This matters for property because many investors in these regions are banking on short-term rental income. Airbnb, holiday letting income is great in a boom, but it's highly volatile in a downturn. So if tourism falls significantly, that income dries up. And without that income, homeowners can't hold. Forced selling in these tourist markets can put meaningful pressure on prices. So what happens to Brisbane property? Brisbane is very different from the regions. It's increasingly a major city in its own right. The 2032 Olympics is a generational infrastructure catalyst. Government spending on transport, stadium, precincts, and urban renewal is locked in over the next decade. And that's somewhat recession-proof spending. Government infrastructure commitments don't typically get cancelled when GDP dips. So Brisbane has a tailwind that's relatively independent of the economic cycle. So in a recession, Brisbane would likely see cooling of the rapid price growth in general. Some suffer in fringe suburbs and in newer estates, but genuine resilience in established inner suburbs with land scarcity and strong owner-occupied demand. The Olympic effect provides a floor most other cities simply don't have right now. Regional Queensland. This is where the picture changes. Regional Queensland is much more exposed. Mining towns have a well-known boom-bust history. When commodity prices fall, and in a global recession they often do, mining activity slows. Royalties drop, workers are laid off, and property in those towns can fall sharply and fast. We've seen this cycle repeat across Mackay, Gladstone, Townsville, and various other resource towns over the years. It's a high-risk, high-return game. In a recession, the risk side of that equation dominates. Tourism-dependent regions face a similar dynamic, strong in the boom, but vulnerable in the bust. So what happens to rents? Queensland rents have been exceptional performance over the last 4 years. Vacancy rates across most of Queensland have been historically low. Brisbane, the Gold Coast, the Sunshine Coast, all running vacancy rates well below the long-term average. That positions Queensland well even in a downturn, because even if sales activity drops and prices soften, The rental market has a structural undersupply problem that won't resolve quickly. So in a recession, rental demand can actually increase. People who are aspiring buyers pull back from the market. They should stay renters. And that keeps rental demand elevated. The risk is really in the holiday let and short-term rental space. Longer-term residential rentals in Queensland look quite resilient. So here's the opportunity. In a recession scenario, Queensland offers some compelling opportunities. Brisbane's inner rings, so established suburbs within 10 kilometres of the CBD with genuine land scarcity and Olympic infrastructure uplifts. Southeast Queensland corridor, the Sunshine Coast to Brisbane to Gold Coast corridor, is structurally growing and offers a range of entry points. Healthcare and education precincts, areas which are anchored by hospitals, university campuses, and major employment nodes, and affordable lifestyle markets. Towns and suburbs attract permanent migration. Here's the key here. Permanent migration and offer genuine livability. So what do you avoid in a downturn? Avoid high tourism, short-term rental markets, fringe mining region properties, and heavily leveraged new estates where developers discounting can undercut comparable resale values. So what's the final verdict on Queensland here? So Queensland is one of the more resilient states in a recession scenario. Strong migration momentum, diversified economy, Olympic infrastructure catalyst, structural rental undersupply. These are all real buffers, but the tourism exposure, the mining region volatility, and the migration equity dependency are real risks here. The strategy in Queensland is to focus on the structural story. Brisbane's growth, the Southeast Corridor, the Olympic pipeline, and not get distracted by tourist market yield. So in the next episode, we tackle Western Australia, a state with incredible boom time performance, but a very specific set of vulnerabilities when commodity prices turn. That's coming up in the next episode. See you there.